I am speaking to the outside world. Wonderful. Okay, we are going to get started. Thank you all for coming. Jackie and I are going to do some introductions, and then we will get going with our students.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. Should we start or give it a few more minutes?
I think we should start.
Yeah? Hi, Councilmember Trigger. Thank you so much for coming. I think we have Councilmember Helen Rosenthal as well. Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. Hold on 1 second. Yes. Councilmember Rosenthal is gonna log back on as a panelist. Thank you everyone for coming. It's so great to see the panelists and so great to see that we have so many participants watching us. We really appreciate having you all here. Let me introduce myself to those who don't know me. I'm Jackie Imani. I'm on the Parent for Education. I'm joining tonight in sponsoring event with Maggie Moore of Advocacy for Children in New York. Pi and AFC have come together to do tonight's event. And before we go any further, Maggie's going to put a few questions on the screen who want to know who's with us. And there'll be 3 quick polls, survey polls that we would love for you to answer. And then we'll share the results in a little while. Maggie.
Yep. So while we're doing that, I just want to explain really briefly why we're here. So 4 years ago, these 4 students plus a few other folks came together. They had just been through the middle school application process. Each of these students is a student who has accessibility needs, and they came together last time to talk about their search for school. Tonight, as they are all poised to move on, sorry, I'm paying attention to the poll, as they're all poised to move on to life after high school, we wanted to bring them back together to talk about their experiences in high school, what worked, what didn't, how fully they were included in school, and all of that. So we're really excited to have them. Before we actually, I'm going to take down this poll and we'll do it later. Before we actually move on, we wanted to introduce, we're joined by 2 of our council members, although I think we're having some technical difficulties with Councilmember Rosenthal. So we're going to start with Councilmember Traeger. Councilmember Traeger, who is the chair of the Education Committee on the City Council and has been a great ally to students with disabilities and students with accessibility needs. He was really very, very pivotal in securing funding in order to increase school accessibility over the next 5 years. He continues to be an ally, and we're really happy to have him here to say a couple words before we launch into our students.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you, Jackie. Great to join the students and the wonderful folks, part of Advocates for Children. I am a tremendous fan of this wonderful organization. Also, big shout out and thanks to my great colleague and fellow member of our budget negotiation team, Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, who has been an outstanding ally and partner every step of the way to support our schools. This is an issue that's also very personal for me. For those of you who know my background, I am a former public school teacher. I carry that with me everywhere I go. My father is a retired District 75 teacher. My mom is a retired paraprofessional. So their stories and their education and my experiences are with me every day. And I'll never forget when I became chair of Education Committee, Advocates for Children prepared a very detailed district by district report about schools that are, whether they're partially accessible, fully accessible, not accessible. And it was very sobering for me to learn that in my district, I don't have any fully accessible schools. And what message does that send to our kids and families and to our staff? That this is not for you? I mean, that's outrageous. It's unlawful, but it's outrageous. It's morally outrageous. And thanks to Advocates for Children, the students, the parents, the families, the teachers who came to testify, the advocates. I remember Jackie also testified many times as well. The council heard you loud and clear, and our speaker did prioritize a significant amount of capital money, about $750 million to make our schools more accessible, but that is still not enough to make all schools fully accessible. Matter of fact, in closing, what I'll share with you, I already spoke to my Congress member, Hakeem Jeffries, about the infrastructure bill that's making its way in Congress and how schools are a critical part of infrastructure, and accessibility needs to be front and center in that conversation. So I just want to pause here and say, we still have a lot to learn and we still have a lot more work to do, but I'm just so grateful to have allies and friends who do this work every day. And just know that we will always have your back. And again, Maggie, thank you for making the time here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Council Member. All right, I see we're having a problem with Council Member Rosenthal. I'm going to put this in Jackie's hands and get on a different computer and see if I can get her on. Council Member Trigger, we hope that you can stay and hear from these students. They're pretty spectacular. So thank you again for being here.
I know she's going to put while we wait for the council member, while we wait for the council member to come, while we have the student introduce yourself, I should also say to council member Krieger, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for all you've done on behalf of students with disabilities, especially those who need accessible schools. So as we wait for Councilmember Rosenthal, why don't we have the students introduce themselves and say who they are, where they go to school, what their disability is that they're comfortable saying. And you're all graduating high school this year, and you want to say your plans for next year. That would be awesome too. So why don't we start with Emma first, and then we'll go around the Zoom.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma. I'm a senior at the Beacon School in Manhattan, and I was born with Klippel-Trenaunay syndrome, which is a congenital vascular disorder and malformation that affects my entire left leg. So I mostly use a wheelchair, but I also am able to use crutches around the house and for shorter distances. And next year I will be going to Northeastern University in Boston, where I will be studying health sciences and sociology.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. Josh, you want to go next?
Certainly, I'm Josh Stern. I'm also a senior at Beacon High School. I have cerebral palsy, which means I use a motorized wheelchair and have limited use of my left hand. So assistive technology is a great friend of mine. And I am going on to NYU Steinhardt next year to major in education studies and hopefully become a history teacher.
Amazing. Thank you, Josh. AB, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Avi. I'm a student at Bard Queens. It is in early college, so I'll be graduating with an associate's degree. Next fall, I'll attend Columbia University. I have cerebral palsy and chorea, a movement disorder. I cannot walk, talk, or use my hands. I use a custom communication system invented by my dad, Teray. I have 2 pairs who take turns physically supporting me and assisting me with my activities of daily living.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. And last but certainly not least, Miguel, you want to say who you are?
Hi, my name is Miguel. I'm 18. I go to Frank Sinatra School of the Arts. I'm a current senior, and next year I'm planning on going to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And hopefully I'll be a record producer. Oh, and my condition is I have a congenital scoliosis and ribogenesis. So I have a major spinal deformity and major chest deformity, which affects the way I breathe every day and stuff.
Great. We're still hoping to connect with Councilmember Rosenthal. I'm going to keep us moving, and we'll come back to her when she gets here. We're hoping that each of our panelists could tell us something that their high school did that they particularly liked, that enabled them to fully participate in the high school's classes and programs. Why don't we switch up the order a little bit? AB, you want to go first?
Before we go, AB, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I forgot to make an announcement, which is anyone has questions for the panelists, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to the end. We can't promise that we will, but we're going to do our best to address other questions at the end of our presentation. Sorry to interrupt. Amy, you want to go?
Yes, so at BARD, I received advance notice on assignments. So this gave me the ability to manage my workload. I also had extended time, but I really tried to work ahead so I could keep up with my classmates. I received sets to support making materials accessible, but I was a gen ed student.
Great, thank you. Emma, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. This isn't anything really specific, but I think throughout my high school experience, I had a lot of teachers that kind of were just very attentive to me and took the time to get to know me before I even like set foot in the classroom for the first time. They would always consult me on like the seating chart or something like that before creating it to make sure that I was in a spot where I would have easy access to the door or any other like class materials or anything like that. And all of my teachers would always appropriately modify different activities or labs or anything like that, so I'd be able to fully participate and engage with my peers. And I think the main thing that my school did that kind of enabled me to fully participate in everything was that they were kind of just really receptive to my suggestions. If I told them that something wasn't working for me, or if I needed help with something, or just simply suggested that maybe they try something another way, then they kind of addressed it immediately. And I think that that made me much more comfortable.
Great, thank you. Miguel, how about you?
Yeah, just to go over like all the services I had over the years, I guess. So yeah, throughout high school, I had a paraprofessional to help me carry like my physical, like my backpack and stuff, because my doctor had put a weight limit on me due to all the surgeries I've had. I've had about 25 so far, and I would have a pair around me. I was in ICT classes, and like Emma, I was able to build a good connection with my teachers, and they were like actually able to help me with my workload, and accommodate me in the classroom as well as outside. And I just maintained a really good what's it called? Just a good communication with them, and they were able to help me excel with the rest of my peers throughout the whole year.
Great, thank you. And Josh?
Well, I think above all, it was a robust command structure in terms of special education, right? There was certainly a sense of the buck stops on the IEP coordinator's desk. And I think that was really great, right? Because there was a channel to push things up through if things needed escalations. But often teachers didn't even need to go that far, right? A lot of it was just talking to teachers. You know, a lot of it is about rapport building. One situation that comes to mind is my 9th grade biology class. We dissected a lot of worms in my 9th grade biology class. And I remember one day the biology teacher walking up to me and basically saying, "Is it okay if I help you with this?" And then giving me hand over hand support, right? To be able to dissect the worm independently without, interestingly, any prompting from one of my related services providers, etc. So I found that really empowering, right? That throughout my career, the teachers were always on the lookout for ways to improve.
Awesome, thank you. And we have, sorry about that, Councilmember Rosenthal. We're really glad to have you here now. Jackie?
Before we go on, Councilmember Rosenthal, do you want to say a quick hello and a few words before we go forward?
Thank you, Jackie. This is going to be the quickest hello known to mankind because Councilmember Traeger hit all the right notes. I'm here to listen and to learn from all of you. And so thank you so much for taking the time to have this forum tonight. That's it. I'm listening to you.
Great, thank
Amazing.
you.
And thank you for being an ally over these years as well.
Thank you for being such a good friend to this community and all your help over the years. So, Maggie, do you have any other polls that you want to do for the participants?
You know what? I think we're going to move ahead with the students and not worry about the polls right now. Although everybody out there listening, we really are interested in you guys. And when we finish going with the students, if there's time, we'd love to know who you are.
Great. So the next question we have for the student is, if there were one or two things you wish your high school could have done differently, what would you have changed? I'm sorry, if there were one or two things your high school could have done differently that could have changed the way in which you participate in class and programs, what would they be? So I don't think we start with Miguel yet. So why don't we start with Miguel?
Yeah. I remember, well, I didn't mention this, but I also had busing because I live quite far from school. I remember that was a very big struggle to get and receive. I had to make a big fight just to get busing to and from school, private busing specifically, because my condition isn't necessarily so visible to people. So because I'm not necessarily in a wheelchair, people do not automatically think I may qualify or need these services. So that's why that was one of the factors as to why it was really hard to get that service.
Great, thank you so much. Emma, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. I think there are two main things that come to mind for me. One of them being my desire to be on my school's track team. A lot of people that know me know that I'm a really big athlete, and I have been for as long as I can remember. And I've been doing wheelchair racing with New York Roadrunners for probably 5 or 6 years now. So I think going into high school, I was so beyond excited that I would have the opportunity to finally get to compete, not just alongside wheelchair racers, but along my fellow able-bodied peers. So going into my freshman year, I approached the principal and a bunch of other people at the school and the coach of the team. And I was immediately rejected and told no, that I was not allowed to participate in the team. And I just was really angry and I couldn't understand why that was happening, but it was something that I was really passionate about. So I decided to keep pushing for it. And finally, if you can believe it, 3 years later in my junior year, they finally allowed me to be on the team. So I got to go to a couple practices, but unfortunately, COVID shut that down pretty fast. So I never actually got to compete with the team. And then briefly, the other thing that comes to mind that I feel like I have to mention is just kind of navigating through the whole college process, because at least in my experience, I think that my college counselor and the college office in general was kind of clueless about colleges that would best be able to support me and help ease the transition. So I think that I was kind of stuck in this situation where me and my family had to kind of navigate things on our own. And it did work out in the end, but I definitely wish that they would have handled that differently as well.
Great, thank you so much. If you want to go next.
didn't go.
Yeah, Amy said, he said, I'm completely satisfied. All the people at Bard made sure if I needed something, I got it.
Wow.
That's great.
Amazing.
That's good. That's great. Josh, you want to go? Sorry, I didn't mean to get lost again.
No worries, no worries. I will echo Miguel. Working with the Office of Pupil Transportation is a bear. And the thing about the Office of Pupil Transportation is that they're good people, right? But I've had this experience where, and this is, no offense to my school or anything, but I've had this experience where, there's a reluctance to reach out to central office, to reach out to folks like the OPT, to do things like adjust bus times for testing, right? Or for after school activities. So I'd run into situations where, let's say I'm taking the SAT and I finish at, 12. Well, I wouldn't be able to go home until 2 because everyone else on my bus route finishes at 2. Now, I'm lucky to have robust contacts at OPT. And so I spoke to them directly and I was like, is this something we can do? And they said yes. And my school said no. Right. And so I think there's a bit of a disconnect with central office these days. And I think that's something that really does need to be addressed.
Great. Thank you so much. Maggie, you want to ask that next
Yeah,
question?
but actually, before I do, I actually just want to sort of jump in with one of the things from the chat. Another student wrote in that he's had issues with paras and busing and nurses over the years, and he's wondering, you all just spoke, or some of you just spoke a little bit to that, so I'm wondering if anyone wants to jump in and say anything in response to that. Josh, you want to start? We'll go backwards.
Okay. Well, I've been blessed, right? And I've been blessed because I asked for things and thankfully people said, sure, right? Did I expect that I would have a bi-weekly meeting with the director of special populations for OPT? No. Am I having one? Yes. So I think, it's all about asking for things, right? And pushing and pushing and pushing. And if it doesn't work, right, and you go up to the next level in the chain, it's going to work eventually. And I think it's important to not lose hope there. There are good people out there. I'm going to close by saying that.
Thanks, Josh. Emma, Miguel, AB, Emma, does anybody want to add to that? You don't need to.
Sure, I'll add. I remember my first year at Sinatra. The person I had didn't really know much on how to really help me. She just seemed very, very inexperienced, and unattentive to the things I needed. For example, not only does my para help me carry my bag throughout school, they also tend to take notes for when I'm out sick or whatever, because I tend to be out but quite often of school. So at the beginning of the year, it was pretty rough just because I didn't really get that support right away. And my school isn't very used to a student like me, especially helping me in a very arts driven environment. So having that was very different for them and myself. So we kind of had to find middle ground on how to really go about doing this and stuff. Eventually I found the right person. She's great. She really helps me out a lot. But at the very beginning it was very rough, and I had to fight extra hard and really tell them what I really needed, sort of put it in their face, to show them what's really going on. So yeah.
Thanks, Miguel. Emma or AB, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, AB wrote, as far as paras, he never really had a para problem because he brought his own.
Thank you. Emma?
I can add something quickly. I actually never took the bus in high school, and I also never had a para, so I can't really relate to that. But I guess this is kind of the opposite. But because I didn't take the bus to school, I took the subway by myself every day. That was one of the barriers that prevented me from getting on the track team sooner, is because I didn't have busing on my IEP plan before that. So for some reason they couldn't figure out a way for me to get busing after school, which kind of made no sense for me. So I think that that is something that they definitely need to work on more in the future as well, because not everyone takes the bus to school, but they might need it for after school activities to be able to participate.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So we're going to pivot a little bit. As everybody is noting in the chat, you guys are already remarkable advocates. But we're wondering if you participated in any activities while you were in high school that focused around advocacy for students with disabilities or around the inclusion of students with disabilities. I kind of know the answer to this, but we want everyone else to hear it. We're hoping that you can tell us what you did, what that was, and share the effects that you think it had on your own high school experience and maybe the experience of your peers as well. Wow. Let's keep mixing this up. AB, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. 4 years ago, I started working with ASAP, the Accessibility Student Advisory Panel. We advocated for improvements in the physical environment and for sensitivity training around interacting with disabled community members, including students and families. And then this year, BARD gave me support to further integrate disability into the school culture. My brother and I started the Able Disabled Alliance, and our advisors helped us bring in speakers and add to the library. We increased the visibility of disabled writers and their narratives. This was possible with a team of students and faculty.
Thank you. Let's see, Miguel?
Yeah. So last year, my junior year, I was able to be a part of my school's pit band, which was one of the greatest experiences at school so far. But it was a real struggle to really get the accommodations I needed, because the stamina I needed in order to be a part of it, it was really tough. We had long rehearsals. Long rehearsals really meant I stayed at school till like maybe 6 or 7, which I wasn't used to. But that also left me without having proper transportation going back home. So I ended up having to take all my things at the subway at times, which was really, really tough for me. And it ended up being quite a bit of times I had to do that. And my school wasn't really able to have busing there to help me get back on during those kind of nights. That was one thing. And as far as staying inside, like during rehearsals and stuff, I couldn't carry my own instrument. I play percussion and drums. So being able to carry all that stuff, it was hard for me. So I would either have to ask my friends, or my friends weren't available. I had no one else but myself. And that was really hard. At times I think I hurt myself once or twice just because I had to lift it a lot. And because of my weight restriction, I wasn't able to, but I had to. I still ended up playing, which was really nice and fun, but it was those things that was hard to really get through during rehearsals.
Thanks. And hard, I imagine, to ask for the additional help. Emma, do you want to share anything here about advocacy around inclusion?
Yeah, sure, I can go. I guess first off, like in school and affiliated with my school, I was a member of a club called Bring Change to Mind that focused on mental health advocacy and kind of destigmatizing it. And while it wasn't like directly related to physical disability advocacy, we led a lot of really powerful presentations and discussions about intersectionality and how having a physical disability can impact one's mental health as well, which I think ultimately kind of really caused some of my peers to question some of their actions in previous years and think about how they could better be an ally to disabled students moving forward. And then outside of school, I work with several disability-related organizations, but one of them that I've done a lot of work with recently is the Vascular Birthmarks Foundation, where I serve as a global ambassador. And as an ambassador, one of my main tasks is to spread awareness about my condition as well as other vascular conditions. So some examples of how I did this is that I did a presentation in one of my classes about vascular birthmarks. And I also did a lot of work on social media, promoting different events and stuff like that to my peers to kind of get them more engaged and involved in the work that I was trying to do. And like I mentioned earlier, I also work a lot with New York Roadrunners. I was a youth ambassador for them for a period of time and also a grand marshal in the 2017 New York City Marathon my freshman year. And for that, we had a famous Paralympian named Tatiana McFadden actually show up to my school beacon and pick me up from school. And a lot of the students were kind of leaving school when that was happening. And I think it was just really great for them to kind of see what wheelchair racing is and kind of get to learn about something new and how I might be bringing that to the school as well.
Amazing, Emma, thank you. And Josh, do you want to share anything here?
So like AB, I started with ASAP, and the rest of my career really is an accident. So in sophomore year, the DOE said to me, hey, we're putting together a panel of students to talk about diversity at a strategic planning retreat, and we'd really like you to participate. I said, sure. Lo and behold, it was time to go back and my bus didn't show up. As a result, I got to stay behind and meet a number of influential people, including Deputy Chancellor Karen Goldmark and Kevin Moran, who was head of the OPT at the time. And people were impressed enough with me that they sort of brought me on board. So I've spent the last 2 years working with Central to really push special education inclusion and student voice in general. And if there's one thing that this experience has taught me, being on the inside behind the glass wall, so to speak, it's that there's not enough of a framework. I'm a frameworks person. There's not enough of a framework to bring student advocates in. It's basically the equivalent of, here you are in a cornfield. Oh, I like your opinions. Let's pull you up into the glass castle, right? And I think it's high time that we started to create a structure where students were able to do this. And this is something that I've seen strides towards with the new chancellor and several policy shifts. And so there are great people, right? But again, it taught me sometimes all you have to do is ask. Sometimes all you have to do is make connections.
Thanks so much, Josh. You guys have done such amazing work in your own way to push disability and to push your own advocacy efforts. It's really amazing to see how there's so many different ways to advocate and so many different ways to make changes in small ways and large ways. And really, it's really neat to see what you've all done over the years. So Emma talked a little bit about mental health. I'm gonna take that a little step further and ask all of you, how has your high school supported you in your social emotional health? What worked well? What didn't work? What do you wish could help more? Can you speak to that? Why don't we start with Josh, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I think my school was fortunate to have a robust counseling program. I think really in terms of socio-emotional health, though, the problem lies in disability awareness, right? it's all about affinity. And I think, they've done a great job of supporting mental health for students in general, but I think it is a struggle, right? Having a disability, and it is a struggle, having to fight. And I've had many great allies, from my school and from Central help me through this process, but it is a struggle having to continuously fight for your rights, right? And so I think it's really important that we look at ways to end social isolation for students with disabilities, right? The whole, oh, all the kids in wheelchairs are just going to sit at this table because that's where the paras put you. You know what I mean? Or, this is insular because no one wants to be friends with you because you have a para, who's an adult who's perceived as being sort of a blocker. And so I think that's something that isn't necessarily a problem at my school, but something that needs to be addressed in a larger sense.
Great, thank you. Emma, do you want to talk more about it? I know you said a little bit, but it'd be great to say a little more if you can.
Yeah, of course. I guess first off, just to add on to what Josh was saying, I think that a big problem at our school is that, yes, we do have a very robust counseling team, but the counseling team that we have does not reflect the diversity of the student population. And I'm not saying that my school needs to go out and hire counselors with disabilities, but I think like Josh was saying, there does need to be a greater awareness amongst the counseling team in our school. So I guess honestly, I don't think that my school has done enough to support my social emotional health, especially as we kind of transition to virtual classes as the pandemic hit, because as a part of my disability, I often have to have a few surgeries per year that require me to miss a fair amount of school and like assignments during that time. And as a senior this year, I have like maybe one or two teachers that I've had in the past and they know me pretty well. But for the most part, all of my teachers are new and they don't really know me. And a few months back, I actually had an experience where I set up a call to kind of tell some of my newer teachers that I would be missing class because I was having surgery. And I asked for an extension on some of my assignments. And when I said this, they kind of looked at me funny, and I had more than one teacher say no to me and then go on to question the truth behind my disability and whether I was being truthful or not, or if I was lying. And one of them even asked me to roll my pants up to show them my leg or go get my wheelchair to prove to them that I was actually disabled and that I wasn't just making this up to get an extension. And I think that was an incredibly hurtful experience and hard to cope with, because I never thought that I would be accused of lying of my disability in my lifetime. I definitely knew a lot of things would happen and I would hear a lot of things about my disability from other people, but I never thought that would be one of them. So I think that in terms of what needs to improve, I think there needs to be more transparency and just better communication between, I guess, advisors and teachers when it comes to disclosing a student's disability and explaining like the extent of their situation, so that something like this never happens to another student. Because visible or not, like Miguel was saying, I don't think that one's disability should ever be questioned in that manner.
Thank you for sharing that story. Every time I think we've taken so many steps forward, I hear stories like that. I realize maybe we haven't gotten far enough. And I really appreciate you telling that story for others to learn from, because I'm speechless that would still happen in today's day. Miguel, do you want to talk a little bit about social emotional health and skills?
Yeah, definitely. To bounce back to what Josh said, I really agree, and having a parent has affected my social life in school, because now there's more paras in my school, but when I first started, I was probably the only one. And people I still got like a sore thumb, people questions why I can't do things on my own like that, because my disability wasn't visible. Everything was more internal. And and that kind of it sucked for a bit. You know, I was the only one who from my middle school going to a new school, going to that school. I didn't know anyone. So my first year was pretty tough. Thank goodness over time I was able to get my own group of friends because we all had the same thing in common. But that was a big like hardship for me internally, as well as busing. Thank goodness I eventually got it, but not being able to have that to have as much of a social life as I hoped I would have, because I wasn't around my friends a lot. I was more with my just with my para, and then straight back home. Never really a chance to get outside of that. That was kind of tough for me.
Thank you, Miguel. Yeah, these are all really hard stories to hear, but good stories for all of us to hear and to learn from. And hopefully advocate for change. Amy, do you want to answer the question?
Yeah. So Amy wrote, he had friends at Bard as soon as he got there, really. Gabe Malika shared his office with me in the library, so I had a clubhouse where my switches were set up to communicate. I could do group work or just hang around with friends. I literally had a place at Bard. It would be better if there was a mini fridge for Gabe seltzers. And he added, as far as mental health, especially since they went virtual, they've been setting aside some mental health days where you learn about coordinating all your work and stress relievers, and do fun things like comedy or meditation, which is great.
Great, thank you. I want to acknowledge that I see some great questions coming in the chat. We're going to put those off until we have a few more things that the students have given a little prior thought to. So the next question is sort of an additional question on top of the last, right? So all of you are here tonight as students who have physical needs that required sort of particular schools, but we're wondering how your schools, do you think that your high schools appropriately supported your learning needs and your learning growth and your experience as learners? What worked? What didn't? What do you want to share? Why don't we start with Miguel this time?
Yeah, I guess, well, I don't know how to really start with that. Do you think you can come back to me? Yeah.
Absolutely, Miguel. Emma, how about you?
Yeah, I can start us off. I think that for the most part, my school did appropriately support my learning needs, kind of like I mentioned earlier. My teachers modified like different activities so that I would be able to fully participate. And I think that that definitely has an impact on my ability to learn. And they always made sure that I was close to the smart board and had easy access to all class materials. And if I didn't, then I always had a peer that was there to get me anything that I needed. And I guess in terms of what could have been improved, this is just kind of personal to me and my situation. But I think I wish that my teachers kind of understood the fact that every day is different for me. Some days are better than others. Some days I have so much pain in my leg from my condition that it impairs my ability to learn. So I wish that my teachers would have been more understanding with that after I have disclosed it to them several times. So that maybe they would have either let me take a quick break to gather myself, or maybe just give me the space I needed to kind of deal with the pain in the moment, and just like not put me on the spot or call on me that day, and kind of just rather let me sit there quietly and just try and keep up with the class instead.
Thanks, Emma. How about Josh? You want to take that next?
Yeah. I think often physical needs translate into learning needs, right? In my case, I'm not able to write on my own. So I rely on, a Macintosh computer and a suite of different technology programs. The biggest issue I've seen throughout my career is getting teachers to put things in accessible formats. And let me tell you, it's labor intensive, right? And so maybe it's not something our teachers should have to do. Maybe it's something that we can set up an external system for. But I think, hi, Maggie's cat, that we should have the ability, right, to have things in whatever format that we need them. And this has been a really interesting kind of perverse benefit of remote learning, right, is that everything is now digital. So, it's so much easier to use the technology. And for me, it was just like settling back into, being at home. But how do we translate that, right, into something that's sustainable for the hundreds of thousands of students that need this service, and something that branches back into the general sort of in-person school year?
Thanks, Josh. Let's hope my cat doesn't do that again. AB, you want to take that?
Yes. So AB says BARD needs a course in the history of the disability rights movement. My brother Izzy Weitzman and I are planning to design a curriculum next year. It will be based on the tutorial I'm doing this year. We're looking for ways to bring disability into the existing courses as well. And he also writes that teachers modified work for him sometimes, and what they realized later is by making some of those modifications for AB, it made it better for all the students. So they actually appreciate it.
Awesome, thank you. And Miguel, you want to take a stab at this one, or you want to let this one go?
Yeah. Well, in school, I had to really go up to my teachers and really like sort of push and let them know what I needed in class. But they were, thank goodness, pretty understanding about what I needed. Once I let them know, like all the things like that would help me in class better. But it was really just a matter of advocating more, which is something I'm still working on, to really get the services I needed.
Great, thank you.
So we have one last planned question, and then we have a few questions out in the chat that we'll get to from everyone. But the last question is there any advice you can give to incoming freshmen who have physical disabilities? What would it be? Or if you could go back to yourself 4 years ago, what do you wish you had known or could have told yourself 4 years ago? Who wants to go first? Dealer's choice.
Can I say something?
Sure,
Yeah.
go for it, Miguel.
I guess for me, I was a pretty quiet freshman year because, like I said, I didn't know anyone. So I guess a big thing I would say is just really, really stand your ground and really like let them know like what's going on, like what you're dealing with. I really wouldn't keep it to myself because for most of high school I did. And I didn't really push. Thank goodness I had Jackie and Maggie to help me announce myself to the bigger heads in my school, all the staff members, because they really didn't understand. They were pretty hard-headed and closed-minded, if I'm being honest. And they didn't really want to listen to me much. So I'd say just really keep an open mind, but still stand your ground and tell them what you really need. Because if you really keep pushing, they're gonna get it.
That's great advice. Who wants to go next?
It's impolite to shout on a Zoom call, so imagine that I'm shouting this, but I want to echo Miguel in saying, speak up, right? People don't know that you need something unless you tell them that you need it, right? That's how I got to where I am, thankfully. in the DOE and with other, policymakers in New York City. It's all about speaking up. It's all about asking the question. As my paraprofessional once very wisely said to me, long before I was sane enough to understand it, Josh, the worst answer you can get on the planet is no. There's nothing worse than no. And more often than not, you'll get yes.
Great advice, Josh. Thank you. Amy, you want to go next?
Yes, AB's advice is start Enable Disabled Alliance. Find a community advisor, and if you need help, email Izzy and AB. Their emails are now in the chat.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for that advice. And Emma, what would you say to incoming students?
I guess I would just reiterate what everyone else said before. I think that it's so important to learn how to be your own advocate in order to navigate through the craziness that is high school, because you, not your parents or your teachers or anyone else, are most aware of what works for you and what doesn't, and what you enjoy, and also what you're uncomfortable with. And it might be awkward at first, but I feel like unless you speak up about what you need, like Josh was saying, then they may not be aware that that's something you need, and they're required to support you the best way that they can. So it's only in your best interest. And I promise that the awkwardness and discomfort of discussing what you need is worth it, because I think adequate supports definitely increase your access to everything that your school has to offer. And I think that having equal access to your peers is so crucial, and it will just make your overall high school experience that much more enjoyable. And I'm not saying that you need to fully become a disability advocate in the broader sense, because I don't believe that that's something that anyone should have to take on if they're not comfortable with it or if they don't desire to. All I'm saying is that you should show up for yourself to get the most out of your own experience.
That's great advice as well. So you guys are amazing. I would love to sit here all night. Why don't we do a couple questions from the chat? Maggie, you want to read one or two questions?
Sure. Thank you. All right. So one of someone I know is a parent wrote in and said, "You are terrific advocates. When did you start attending your IEPs?" And I would just add to that, do you attend your own IEP meetings? How did you build your advocacy skills? You've talked a little bit about that. When did you tell your parents or guardians, "I've got this," and started leading your own advocacy for your education? I think, that's jumping off of the fact that you're all obviously well-versed in advocacy on your own behalf. So if somebody wants to take that would be great. Josh, you want to start with that?
Yep. The short answer to your question is 6th grade. The longer answer to your question is that it really should be a natural transition, right? My parents from an early age, when I was in kindergarten, I couldn't really read that well. My parents from an early age pushed me to be curious, right? And to be someone who thought very critically about the world. And so I think that fueled what was largely a natural transition in 6th grade into the IEP world. And I remember one particularly impassioned moment when they wanted to take away basically all of my supports. I turned to the school psychologist who was at the meeting and I said, if you give a plane gas, it will fly. If you take the gas out of the plane, it will glide for several hours and then it will crash. If you give the plane gas, then you're seeing the impact of the gas, not the plane flying. So you're seeing how I am with my supports, not how I am without them. And that changed my world and the way that the school looked at me for the next, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to take a stab at answering this one?
Sure. Yes, AB said he never goes to his IEP meetings. But at his school, if he ever had a problem, if he ever needed something, he asked the teacher, and they were always open to it and basically gave him what.
Great, thank you. Emma or Miguel?
Yeah, I've attended my IEP meetings, but there were just times I didn't feel so comfortable attending just because I just knew it would have been a bit of tension as to trying to get my services. I didn't really want to deal with it at the moment. Plus, it was always during the end of the years, and during the end of the school year, there's like a lot of stuff happening for me. Especially in high school, there was a lot of stuff going on. But yeah.
Thanks. Emma?
Yeah. I think I've attended my IEP meetings for as long as I can remember. And for the most part, I'd say I'm always pretty comfortable. There are definitely times where I'm not super comfortable, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that sometimes me and my parents disagree on what we think should be on the IEP. But I know that my parents are definitely the sane ones. They keep me in line, and I just am very independent. And just kind of love to do everything myself. So I think sometimes I'm not able to recognize when I might be pushing it too far, and where I might need additional support. So I'm glad that we're both there to kind of keep each other in line to work out what's best for me.
I love that answer. True high school student answer. That was awesome.
All right, Jackie's muted.
Josh, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to add on a thing really quickly. More is less, right? It's always good to have the ability to back something up, right? And not use it and say, look, I'm given this in case of emergency, because you never know when the thunderstorm will hit. And when it hits hard, right? They're not going to say, it's interesting. I was just on a webinar for NYU on accommodations. And one of the things that they said was, they're not going to say, if you put in to use an accommodation, why are you not doing this, right? More likely than not, no one's going to care, but it's going to come to your aid when you're faced with a problem and you have a solution.
Thank you. So another question in the chat is, do you feel your school set up full inclusion rights? Do you feel that your schools set up full inclusion rights to be successful and to have reciprocal friendship with all students, not just students with disabilities, and they encourage full integration versus an accommodation mindset? That makes sense? Okay.
Yep.
I don't want to comment. You want to start that, Josh?
Yeah. First of all, is it just me, or is the term reciprocal friendships a little bit clinical, right? The high school social environment is tough, because people are starting to exert their independence, right? And going back to the idea that you're throwing an adult in the mix, that you're throwing an aide in the mix who is seen often wrongly by these students as someone in a position of authority is difficult, right? So I think, a good friend of mine in city government once said, it all starts with education. And I think that's true. It starts with the perceptions that we have as children. It starts with what we see on PBS Kids, right? If we're exposed to something at an early age, we're more than likely to take it in and to explore it and internalize it, right? And so part of my question in life is, what would happen, right, if people saw, on Dora the Explorer at age 3, people in a motorized wheelchair? I think that would change the world.
That's a great idea. I love that. I really do. Anyone else want to talk to this and full inclusion? I might get one. Anyone?
I mean, I can add a little bit. I feel like my experience is kind of unique because, like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't using busing and I also didn't have a paraprofessional. So I think in that sense, I was really lucky and privileged because those didn't really serve as any barriers in my social life at school. I didn't have like this schedule like Miguel and Josh were talking about, how once you left school, you were just with the pair and then you had to get on the bus and go straight home. Because I didn't use those resources, I had the flexibility to kind of go hang out with my friends after school and do stuff like that. So I definitely think that I had a different experience, and I don't know if I would have been better off using those sports or not. But I am glad and I feel lucky, like I mentioned, that I was able to have those experiences. So I guess I can't really talk about like my school specifically and like if they do are set up in a way that allows for full inclusion, but in my experience with that, I definitely had a pretty good experience.
Great, thank you so much. AB and Miguel, do you have something to add? AB?
Yeah, Avi said at Bard, there was no really special setup for it. It was just I was able to sit and be with my classmates and make friendships just like any other typical high school.
That's great. Miguel, do you have any other words to say?
Yeah. Basically what Josh said. High school, you just wanna you wanna have your own independence, you know, and really feel like you could do things for yourself. As much as I didn't like having the service, I like having a parent and stuff, because it did affect me socially. I knew deep down I really needed it. Even though I didn't really want it, I knew it was the best thing for me. But it was just an internal struggle because I wanted that independence so much, to be able to have that luxury or that leisure to be able to go out with my friends after school, like a no biggie, like Emma was able to. That was a hard thing to do. And in that sense, yeah, it was a bit hard.
Thank you. So, and I'm gonna give people a few more minutes to ask any additional questions they have. And at time, I'm gonna ask one more question I have, which is what are you looking forward to as you go to college? What I'm sorry, as you move to college, what is exciting to you? What can you not wait? What can't you wait for in your next steps? Anyone?
Yeah, can I go?
Yeah.
Personally, me, I'm really excited to just go out of the city somewhere else, because I would really like to feel that independence of living by myself, living on my own, getting my own space for myself. Like, yes, I love my family, I love the city. I'll always be a city kid at heart, but you know, to feel like I'm my own person going away, finally get that feeling. I'm very eager to have, I guess. And when I get to school, I'm just really excited for the networking possibilities, just things I'll be open to, because it's just a whole school full of musicians. Nothing but that. It's kind of where I like to be. That's like heaven for me. So to be able to work with other people, like-minded people like me, and hopefully add on to a mix and maybe expose people to things, you know, I've experienced, like this, like what we're doing right now, you know. I'm excited for college.
I can go next. I agree with what Miguel said. I love the city as well, and I love my family, but I think I'm definitely very comfortable in the city now, almost too comfortable. I'm very independent. I go everywhere by myself in the city. So I think for college, I'm definitely excited to push myself out of my comfort zone and explore a new city in Boston. And I'm excited to learn how to navigate Boston because I think that that's a really important just next step for me. And I'm excited for my school and the new people I'm going to meet there. I'm actually going to school with one of my best friends from high school. So I'm excited that she'll be there, but also at the prospect of meeting new people. And two of my cousins also live in the area, and one of them goes to Northeastern as well. So that'll be exciting. And I guess in terms of the school specifically, my school has a co-op program. And I'm really excited to get to utilize that. I want to go into like the pre-med track, I'm thinking. And there's a lot of great hospitals in Boston Children's Hospital, which I've attended as a patient a couple of times. So I'm excited at the opportunity to potentially do some co-op work at some of those really great Boston hospitals as well.
That's awesome. That's great. Amy, you wanna go?
Yeah. Yes. So AB's really excited. He's going to Columbia, but he's going to dorm there because he wants the typical fun college experience away from family. And he's excited because there's a lot to learn there, and he wants to meet new people.
Sorry. And Josh, you want to have the last word on this?
Certainly. On an unserious note, the food is delicious. On a more serious note, it's the opportunity to sort of live and breathe education 24/7, 365, and really sort of push myself to new heights. And I'm hoping that united in a common interest, right, we can look past sort of the cliques of high school. The first weeks of college can be disorienting for all. And so I'm really hoping to establish a core group of like-minded people, right, who are not only friends, but also collaborators.
Thanks, Josh. Someone else just posted an interesting question. I'm a school nurse and I used to do one-to-one like para work. Have any of you ever asked your para to give you some space in order to socialize? My student and I had a code word for privacy. I'm sorry, I'm not reading very clearly right now. That's because something else just came in. Yeah, we had a code word for privacy, and he had to promise to have the courage to ask a friend to get me from the other side of the room. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Josh, oh, sorry, Miguel, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I had pretty open communication with my para. I didn't have like a code word necessarily or anything like that. But if I needed her for something, like we had our signal. She knew if I needed something or if I wanted to stay back a little bit. She understood. She didn't get mad at me like others really did, because others thought they had to stay with me 24/7, like my guard. But she knew, like, this was my space. Do your thing. But if I needed her for something in class, she was still very attentive and understanding towards that.
Excellent, thank you. But I think I'm going to let you guys self-identify. AB, Emma, Josh.
I think it's important to remember, above all, that paras are not guards. But I think really, right, I really benefited from the fact that I have a motorized wheelchair, right? And so there are certain courses where, I'll need my para because they're taking notes or whatnot. But in between classes, right, he was mostly a text away, right? So I was able to move independently through the school building and only get him when I needed him. And I'm incredibly lucky to have that ability. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what confidence can do.
Yeah, thank you. Emma, Abby?
Yeah, AB said no. My para, he was always around, but I never mind.
He's got a good para. So, Emma, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief because I didn't have a para in high school. But I think one of the main reasons I chose not to have a para in high school, I don't fully need one, but the option was definitely there if I felt that I needed it at any point. But I think throughout much of middle school and elementary school, when I did have a para, one of the things that I often struggled with was just the boundaries between us and kind of finding this balance between when to give me space and when to not give me space. And that's why I was definitely really apprehensive going into high school about having a para, and I chose not to have one. So I think that moving forward, not just at my school, but at all schools, I think that dynamic and that relationship and kind of finding this balance between when to kind of give the students more space and when to kind of back off is something that we definitely need to work on. But I must say that if I would have had any parent Beacon, I wish I could have stolen Josh's because Mr. Young took me to track. So I had him help me out after school sometimes, and he was great. So we need more pairs like Mr. Young.
It's funny because there's a note in the chat from another student saying, can they have Miguel's para when Miguel leaves?
Yeah, I think you would like
you find
Mr.
a good
Young
one, you
even
keep
better.
them. I think that's it for the questions, everybody. I was going to poll you all to find out who else was in the room, but I think that I want to end with the students' voices. I know that Emma, AB, Josh, and Miguel, you know, they're rock stars, each one of them in their own way, and will continue to be. I have known them for a while, and Jackie has known them for even longer, and we've watched them really grow, and I'm sure they're going to continue doing this. If you guys can give them a virtual, you know, round of applause, that would be amazing. Right, most of us can't be seen, but we know that everybody's out there applauding you guys. Councilmember Rosenthal, thank you for staying and listening. We were really happy to have Councilmember Traeger here earlier. Thank you guys for adding your voices. We are recording this. We will be sharing it. So the rest of you, if you know people who wanted to watch and didn't get a chance, they will have their chance. And Jackie, students, anybody want to add anything else before we sign off?
I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for the council member, and thank you to all the students for doing this. It's inspiring. I hate that word, but it really is wonderful to hear stories and others can learn from your stories. And we really appreciate able to share them so others have learned from them. Thank you. I'm gonna miss you guys terribly next year, but I know that we'll speak to any of you and watch you guys through college and beyond. I can't wait to see what becomes of all of you. You're amazing people, amazing citizens, whether in New York or beyond, wherever you choose to go. So thank you so much, and thank you to all the participants who watched us tonight. It was a great turnout, and we love to having you all.
You guys are getting major props in the chat.
Yes.
So thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Maybe we'll do it again in 4 years.
4 years later, now you've been through college. Now what?
Yeah.
Right, we'll bring you back together. I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
leave
guys.
it. I'm gonna leave it running for a minute, students, so that you guys can see all the applause you're getting in the chat. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys. Thank you again.